Thank you very much. I now call on Maurice Golden to close to the Conservatives. Mr Golden, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It is important not to lose sight of the most important aspect of this debate, how to protect Scottish jobs, businesses and the economy, a point made expertly by my colleague Murdo Fraser. Regardless of members' views on the Constitution, it is an indisputable fact that Scotland's economy is intertwined with the rest of the United Kingdom. As such, there is a responsibility on every MSP to ensure the continued success of the UK internal market. There are simply too many Scottish jobs at stake, over 500,000 in fact, as my colleague Dean Lockhart pointed out. We heard from Alec Rowley, who gets more cheers from the SNP benches than he does the Labour ones these days. He claims the bill breaks international law. Untrue, incorrect and ill-informed as ever. A point made further by a number of SNP members, as well as, of course, Patrick Harvie, who claimed members, including myself, opposed the Scottish Parliament. I did not. I would have supported it if I were old enough to vote, Mr Harvie. And with almost two-thirds of all the Scottish trade conducted with the rest of the UK, businesses need certainty that commerce will carry on as usual across the United Kingdom now we have left the EU. The UK Internal Market Bill provides that certainty, that products made in one part of the United Kingdom will not face additional barriers to market in another part of the UK, and that consumers in one part of the UK are not disadvantaged by limiting access to goods and services. Not only is that plain common sense, it is what we have done for centuries. The UK Internal Market Bill brings the process into the 21st century to work with devolution. As long as they do not discriminate against goods and services from elsewhere in the UK, devolved governments will be able to set their own rules and standards, which are then recognised across the entire UK. The SNP had to take the EU to court to get their alcohol minimum pricing scheme through. Under the UK Internal Market Bill, they could introduce that scheme without court action. Liz Smith eloquently articulated how the doctrine of proportionality would allow divergence and enhance devolution. I'll give way to Patrick Harvie.
Patrick Harvie.
I recognise the extent to which the member is making real efforts to do the mental gymnastics necessary to justify this bill. He's making a good effort at it. But does he at least acknowledge the substantial amount of evidence that didn't come from politicians, didn't come from pro-independence activists, came from independent witnesses telling us that this bill will leave more uncertainty and will leave major decisions in the hands not of democratic parliaments here or at Westminster, but in the hands of the courts. Exactly the same kind of uncertainty he wants to oppose is written into this bill.
Maurice Golden.
No. I won't be taking any lessons from Patrick Harvie, who has a modus operandi to destroy devolution. That's what he wants. I'm here standing up for devolution. And that's why we require cooperation across business groups, such as what the CBI have been calling for. And the Conservatives stand ready to work with the Scottish Government on this bill. I would urge the SNP to at least keep their minds open to cooperation, even if their natural instinct is not to. And I'll come to that in a moment. For example, it would have been welcome today to hear the SNP discuss how best to use the new powers from the UK Internal Market Bill to take. Of course, they laugh because they want to give those powers to unelected officials in Brussels and send them away from the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Conservatives are keen to have that discussion and ensure those powers are used for the best of the people of Scotland. That is why it's so disappointing today to see another ill-tempered debate with nationalist politicians more interested in senseless UK bashing than properly considering this legislation. They take every opportunity to undermine and oppose the UK, even when that risks thousands of Scottish jobs. Why else would the
Just a
Cabinet...
minute, sorry. Mr. Arthur, you're shouting to people in the gallery and you're softly spoken, Mr. Golden. So I'd like to hear what Mr. Golden has to say. Please continue.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I go back to my earlier point. Why on earth would the Cabinet Secretary walk out of talks on the UK internal market? The Cabinet Secretary claims he felt the talks would have led to a proposal that threatens devolution. But are we really supposed to believe a man who actively campaigns to end devolution, as Patrick Harvey does, is suddenly concerned with preserving it? That same ideological opposition to the UK sees the Cabinet Secretary accept the need for common frameworks covering specific sectors, whilst refusing to take the next logical step of providing a regulatory baseline to fill the gaps between those frameworks, as the bill aims to do. The SNP must accept that ignorant anti-UK sentiment will not help Scottish jobs and businesses. A more modern and progressive approach would be engaging constructively with the UK Government on all legislation and other measures being undertaken to safeguard and protect Scottish jobs and livelihoods.
Thank you very much, Mr. Golden. I call on Michael Russell to close to the Scottish Government. Mr. Russell, please.
Presiding Officer, thank you. Can I make 3 introductory points which are factually based so that Mr. Golding can have those facts on the record? 1, there is no threat from any of the devolved administrations or governments or parliaments to the continuation of seamless, unfettered trade within the UK. There is no such threat. No Tory has been able to point to such a threat. There is no intention of such a threat. So let's make that clear. Secondly, you do not have to be in the same constitutional structure to trade with your largest customer. If you did, the UK would not be leaving the EU. That is simply reality. And thirdly, this bill is illegal. It contains breaches of international law. It would therefore be against the ministerial code for any minister in this chamber to support this bill. Now, I have to say that no thank you, no thank you. I have the sound of your voice in my ears enough this afternoon. I couldn't take any more of it. I'm sorry. Even I have a limit to that sort of suffering. I have to say to you that I have a lot of time for some Conservative members. Not many, I have to say. And I'm going to again embarrass Liz Smith because I have a lot of time for Liz Smith. She was my shadow when I was Education Secretary. She regularly called for my resignation, but I got over it, I have to say. And therefore I want to reflect on something that she said about the change over the last few years. Now, she said it, unfortunately, I thought, in a somewhat dismissive way, as if I had changed my mind and vacillated on these matters. But actually, I just want to go back to 4 years ago. And it's useful that Ruth Davidson is sitting behind her, because she herself, on the day after the 23rd of June, a period after, was very clear that what Scotland should be seeking is the closest possible relationship with the EU, and indeed continued membership of the single market and the customs union. Those were the things that united most of these chambers after the 23rd of June. And isn't it extraordinary that just over 4 years on, what we've actually experienced this afternoon, Tory members mouthing off about us handing powers to Brussels, attacking alignments on standards, bad-mouthing Europe, essentially painting Europe as the devil incarnate, because that's what we've heard and that's what we hear again and again. Also, a huge attack on devolution, an attack on the powers of this Parliament, not about making sure that Scotland could continue to be in the single market and the customs union, but in actual fact that our powers should be diminished. And consider, no, thank you, no. If there's one thing worse than Mr. Golding's voice, it was yours. I have to say no, absolutely not. Huge attack on devolution, huge attack of well, yes.
Cabinet,
I can't.
sorry,
No.
Miss Smith, just sit down a wee minute. Cabinet Secretary, I'm sure you can do better than that, than to use personal insults. Miss Smith.
Presiding Officer, I know.
Sorry, Cabinet Secretary, you're taking an intervention, I take from Miss Smith.
I what?
Yeah, well, that's it now.
I apologise to you, but if you...
No, it's not a discussion.
Fine.
Miss Smith, please.
I won't waste the opportunity. Could I just ask the Cabinet Secretary once again, can he name one single power that is going to be removed from this Parliament?
I can indeed. I can...
Cabinet Secretary.
The powers of devolution will be removed because That is a single or collective power. And, well, I want to come on in a moment, Presiding Officer, to the laughter on the Tory benches, which was deeply unpleasant at times this afternoon and is unpleasant again now. Because the reality is every power that this Parliament has can be second-guessed as a result of this bill. There is no doubt about that. But there's been a huge attack on devolution, and the Tories have been isolated this afternoon as extreme Brexiteers. All of them have been isolated as extreme Brexiteers who not only admit the breach of international law, but revel in the breach of international law. And the saddest thing of all of this is the refusal to listen to any and all opinion that has been expressed on this matter. Mr. Lockhart heard from the committee before he spoke, which made it clear, and I think Bruce Crawford's final words were, that devolution cannot work if the UK government imposes its view on the devolved nations. He made that clear. They heard from Labour, Alec Rowley saying, think again. They heard from Patrick Harvey, who talked about the decision-making of the UK government. They heard from the Lib Dems, and I rarely, if ever, can actually not criticise a word of Willie Rennie's speech. I enjoy criticising words of Willie Rennie's speeches, and on this occasion I can't, which will put him in deep trouble with Mr Rumbles, but he has my approbation for actually doing that. Then we heard from the Royal Incorporation of Architects of Scotland, the GTC, the NFUS, the SCDI, all dismissed. And indeed, the NFUS, in a very sinister move, were misquoted on what they said. Because they were clear, they were very clear in the submission on the white paper what they felt. But that was brushed aside. Because the reality is that, in the words of an Irving Berlin song, they're all out of step but Jim. They're all out of step except what the Tories believe to be true, and not even they believe it. Because there are people on the Tory benches who know this is deeply wrong. This is deeply wrong. Because this goes well beyond what should be happening. And we heard that in the rather nervous laughter on the Tory benches during the opening speeches. They were giggling like school children when they'd heard a naughty word. But I couldn't actually work out what the naughty word was. Was the naughty word Scotland? Was the naughty word democracy? Or was the naughty word devolution? Because on each of those occasions, they were giggling away at those words. I want to conclude, Presiding Officer, by making something very clear. There is no doubt whatsoever, from the evidence that the committees have heard, there's no doubt from the bill itself, this is a major attack on devolution. It is illegal, and if it is supported today by the Tories, they are aiding and abetting a hostile Westminster government in undermining this Parliament. There are no ifs, there are no buts on this. They are also voting for something that is against international law, and they will know it. And this afternoon there were 3 solicitors who sat on the Tory benches, who sat through this, and not one of them referred to the legal issues in this bill. That is shocking. I go back those 4 years, because 4 years ago, just after the Brexit referendum, there was a view in this chamber that we could find a way forward for Scotland that preserved something of the valuable things we have from the EU. And now we have a host of ranting Brexiteers who are about, Mr Simpson laughs, a host of ranting Brexiteers who are unfortunately undermining this Parliament and the democracy of Scotland. It will not stand. It will not stand. Tom Arthur made that point, and I make it again. This is wrong. It should not happen. We should refuse permission, and we should continue to oppose this, no matter what.
Thank you very much.